You have a headache. A real one. The kind that sits behind your eyes and doesn't move. Now imagine the cure isn't a pill. It's a stranger holding a sharpened stone above your skull. For tens of thousands of years, this wasn't a nightmare. This was medicine. Long before hospitals, before antibiotics, before anyone understood what a virus even was, your ancestors were already doctors. Not trained ones. Not certified ones. But observant ones. They watched what worked and what didn't, and they kept doing what worked, even when they had no idea why it worked. Some of their methods sound insane today. Drilling holes into a living human skull. Chewing on tree bark for pain relief. Letting insects eat away dead flesh to save a limb. But here's the twist. A surprising number of these primitive treatments weren't superstition at all. They were early, crude versions of real medicine. Medicine we still use, in different forms, right now. Let's start with the most shocking one. Trepanation. Trepanation is the practice of cutting or scraping a hole into the human skull while the person is still alive. It sounds like torture. In many cases, it was actually treatment. Archaeologist John Verano has spent decades studying trepanned skulls from ancient Peru, and what he found changes the whole picture. In some regions, the survival rate for this surgery was remarkably high. Bone had grown back around the edges of the hole, which only happens if the patient lived for months or years afterward. This wasn't random mutilation. It was deliberate, repeated, and refined over generations. Why would anyone do this? For head injuries, swelling on the brain can build pressure that kills a person slowly. Cutting a hole in the skull, in some cases, could actually relieve that pressure. Your ancestors didn't have MRI machines. They had trial, error, and the willingness to try again the next time someone came to them with a cracked skull and no other options. Think about that for a second. Someone, thousands of years before written language, figured out that releasing pressure from a swollen brain could save a life. No textbook. No teacher, just observation, repeated enough times to become knowledge. But not every ancient cure involved a blade. Some came from the forest floor. In 2012, researcher Karen Hardy examined the fossilized dental plaque of Neanderthals at the El Sidrón cave site in Spain. Dental plaque might not sound exciting, but it works like a time capsule. Whatever got stuck in someone's teeth 50,000 years ago is often still there, preserved in mineral form. What Hardy found inside one Neanderthal's teeth was startling. Traces of poplar bark, which contains a natural compound called salicin. Your body converts salicin into salicylic acid. That name might sound unfamiliar, but you already know its modern cousin. It's the active ingredient in aspirin. This particular Neanderthal also showed signs of a painful dental abscess, sick, in pain, and reaching for a plant that happened to contain a natural painkiller. That's not an accident. That's medicine, tens of thousands of years before the first pharmacy existed. And it gets stranger. In the same dental sample, Hardy's team also detected traces of a mold related to penicillium, the same fungal family that gave us penicillin. Whether this was intentional use of a natural antibiotic or simply what happened to be growing nearby is still debated. But either way, ancient humans were already surrounded by the raw ingredients of modern medicine. They just didn't have a lab. They had instinct, pain, and repetition. Now let's reconstruct a scene. Picture a small group sheltering near a cave mouth in what is now northern Spain. The air is cold. Someone's jaw is swollen, throbbing with infection. An older member of the group, someone who has seen this before, strips bark from a nearby tree and hands it over without a word. There's no diagnosis. No explanation. Just memory. This worked last time. Do it again. That's how medicine survived before writing existed. Not through textbooks, but through people who remembered what helped, and passed it on face to face, generation after generation. Here's where the story takes its strangest turn. In 1991, hikers in the Alps discovered a mummified body preserved in ice for over 5,000 years. Researchers named him Otzi. His body was remarkably intact, and on his skin, scientists found something unexpected. 61 tattoos, mostly simple lines and crosses, clustered around his joints. Not on his arms for decoration. not symbols of status. They were placed directly over areas where X-rays later revealed arthritis and joint degeneration. Researcher Leopold Dorfer proposed something that reframed the entire discovery. These weren't decorative tattoos at all. They may have been an early form of pain therapy, placed at points strikingly similar to those used in acupuncture, a practice not documented in writing for another 2,000 years. If Dorfer is right, ancient humans in Europe were already using something resembling acupuncture, independently, long before it was ever written down in Asia. Two different cultures, separated by continents and centuries, arriving at similar conclusions about pain and the body. Not because they copied each other. Because pain is universal, and so is the drive to relieve it. There's one more method worth mentioning, because it might be the strangest of all. Maggot therapy. Letting insects crawl into an open wound sounds like the opposite of healing. But maggots eat dead, infected tissue while leaving healthy flesh alone. Ancient and traditional healers across multiple continents independently noticed something odd. Wounds that became infested with certain fly larvae sometimes healed faster and cleaner than wounds that didn't. Instead of panicking and scraping the maggots away, some healers learned to let them work. This wasn't written down in any formal medical text for a very long time. It was observed, quietly, by people tending to soldiers and hunters with wounds that refused to close. And the strange part is that this ancient observation was so effective that sterile maggot therapy is still used today in modern hospitals, specifically to clean wounds that antibiotics alone can't fully treat. A treatment that looks like a horror scene is, in reality, one of the oldest continuously validated medical techniques in human history. Picture the scene again, this time somewhere warmer, further back in time. A hunter returns to camp with a deep gash along his leg, torn open by a fall or a fight with prey. The wound festers in the heat. Days pass. Someone notices the wound with insects in it is somehow less swollen, less red, than wounds left untouched. No one understands bacteria. No one understands infection. But someone remembers, and the next time a wound festers, they let it happen again. This is the counterintuitive twist. We like to imagine ancient medicine as blind superstition, dumb luck wrapped in ritual. But the evidence tells a different story. Trepanation, pain relief from bark, tattoos placed at pressure points, wounds tended by insects. These weren't guesses thrown at the wall. They were patterns, tested and repeated because they worked, refined slowly across thousands of years by people with no writing system, no scientific method, and no way to prove germ theory. What they had instead was something you still rely on today, whether you realize it or not. Observation. If it helps, remember it. If it doesn't, let it go. That is still, at its core, how medicine advances. The tools have changed. The instinct hasn't. Now think about your own medicine cabinet. That bottle of aspirin sitting in your bathroom traces its lineage back to tree bark chewed by a suffering Neanderthal in a cave in Spain. The stitches a doctor uses after surgery echo techniques refined by healers who had already learned, through painful trial and error, which wounds needed closing and which needed to breathe. Even the antibiotics prescribed at your last checkup share an ancestor with mold your distant relatives may have unknowingly consumed for its healing properties. You are not as far removed from that cave as you think. Next time you take a painkiller, or clean a cut, or feel relief wash over you after treatment, you're participating in a chain of trial and error that started before history was written down. Your ancestors just wanted the pain to stop, the same way you do. Think, too, about how much trust these old methods required. There was no guarantee any of it would work. No clinical trial. No second opinion from another doctor down the hall. Just a person in pain, and another person willing to try something, based only on what they remembered from the last time. That kind of medicine demanded courage on both sides. The healer risked being wrong. The patient risked everything by letting them try. And yet, generation after generation, enough of these methods worked often enough that they survived. They got passed down, refined, and eventually, thousands of years later, rediscovered by scientists holding microscopes instead of sharpened stones. What's easy to forget is that none of this knowledge came from a single genius. It came from thousands of ordinary people, watching closely, remembering carefully, and choosing to try again after something failed. That's not so different from how medicine still advances today, even with all our technology. Someone notices a pattern. Someone tests it. If it works, it spreads. You have a headache. A real one. The kind that sits behind your eyes and doesn't move. This time, you reach for a pill instead of a stranger with a sharpened stone. But somewhere in that small orange bottle is the ghost of a Neanderthal chewing bark in the cold, trying, like you, just to feel better.